I'm joined now by Matthew Kaminski, the co-founder of Politico Europe. Welcome to the program. Welcome to TVP World.
Good to be here.
I believe we've all seen and heard what happened recently in the White House in Washington. And you say, or you're trying to imply, that this is going to be a symbol of the politics of the 21st century. That's a bit worrying, isn't it?
Well, it could be a great turning point in the politics of the 21st century if it does signal a major shift that we've had suggested by some people around Donald Trump, but was quite dramatically articulated in this meeting. I mean, no one's ever seen something like this before in public play out this way. And if it signals, one, that America is abandoning an ally in the time of war, as is being suggested since. Two, we are looking to strike a strategic agreement with Russia as a way to counter China, but in the process alienating, 80-year-old friendships and, alienating or just destroying NATO and the friendships the U.S. has had since World War II in Europe.
Do you find it realistic that NATO will be dead, that the United States will destroy NATO and abandon European allies?
Well, if we let it, sure, it's realistic. I think this is, everything seems realistic now in our politics. But I don't think the game is over. Just in a narrow sense, I don't think it's over for the Ukrainians. Trump didn't say the deal is off on the minerals. He just said, come back when you're ready to talk, in a very Trumpy kind of, I'm showing that I'm the alpha dog here, right, and Zelenskyy is not. Secondly, suddenly not everything has been blown up here. It was just one incident in the White House. It was preceded by a very good visit from Keir Starmer, the British Prime Minister, then the French President before, the Polish Foreign Minister. I think Sikorski was there the previous week. So there are these conversations and these very deep security and commercial relationships that are still in place.
So you say that the game is not over, and indeed it isn't over, but the rules of the game seem to be over, or at least we don't see any rules at the moment. Would you agree?
Well, they've been over Donald Trump is not president for the first time, by the way. A lot of this is very familiar to those of us.
But it's a different Donald Trump this time than he used to be in the first term.
Well, it's only 5 weeks in. He's definitely more self-confident. He's definitely much more feels unleashed to be who he wants to be, apparently. And his team around him is very different. Having someone like J.D. Vance as vice president, who is younger, but also quite much more pure America first kind of MAGA politician, does not want the U.S. as closely involved in the world's problems as the Republican establishment.
How would it affect politics, that difference in his team now that from what it used to be in the
affecting the policy, obviously. I mean, if you have Tulsi Gabbard, she's the head of intelligence.
For worse or for better?
Well, it depends where if you're Vladimir Putin and Chairman Xi in Beijing.
They're running out of champagne at Kremlin now.
Seemingly, the way that he's seeing the world, this has been a fantastic couple of weeks, where Trump has conceded everything that Putin would want without asking anything in return. If you're Xi, by the way, you're maybe thinking, this is America is withdrawing. That's an opportunity for us. It's an opportunity for us to think about what we do in Taiwan, to sort of throw our weight around Asia. If you're America's allies in Asia, you have doubts about America's commitment. Sure, these are all not very happy scenarios if, like me, you happen to think that an America that was the safeguarded freedom and free markets and trade in the world.
It's definitely over, or is it not? Or is it just a break in the...
No, because again, what Trump says and what Trump does are not always the same thing. And one has to look at what he does and will do as a... By the way, what he says is pretty important because he's a damn American president. But, you got to see how this plays out. That's why it's so important for both business leaders, political leaders, to engage and get in the ear. Right. There are people around him in the Republican Party who have very different views than the people that we mentioned just
Matthew, now. How should Europe play the game with Donald Trump, with no rules that are in place at the moment?
I'm not sure there's no rules in place. I think Donald Trump is being very transparent about what he wants. So he's wants the Europeans to take more responsibility for their defense. You should say, yes, we will take more responsibility for our defense. We're going to spend a lot more on defense. We will rearm. And if you can say we will guarantee the security. Look, Europe is 10 times the size of Russia economically speaking. There is no financial reason except Europe's politics that prevent Europe from rearming properly. So yes, that's the one thing. Second thing is, there are European leaders that have good relationships with this White House. The key thing will be to prevent Europeans from freelancing, I'm doing this for Finland, I'm doing this for Italy, but to really do present a kind of unified stance.
That's what Trump hates. He definitely prefers bilateral relations rather than the European Union as a whole. He quite aggressively says that.
A lot of American
presidents
like
it. He hates it, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, he thinks,
we were founded to cheat on the United States. Remember that quote from a few weeks or even
the EU was
days
founded
ago.
by the United States in Washington. There was a meeting in Washington that was critical to the founding of the EU and certainly supported by the U.S. because the EU guarantees peace and prosperity in Europe. That's why the U.S. has always been for it. But Trump is not the first president to be annoyed by the EU or confused by it. Bill Clinton didn't like it. Obama didn't like it very much. Most American presidents likes interpersonal relationships. Politics is a human sport. It's about people getting along with each other. And Viktor Orbán should not be the only European leader who's got Trump's ear. Orbán does have Trump's ear a lot. But the Polish prime minister, the Polish foreign minister should have Trump's ear. That goes for the Finns, it goes for the Italians, it will go for the new German Chancellor Merz. Obviously, Macron and Starmer have just been there for that very reason.
Do you see it as what has been said a few times on a few comments, that what Trump is doing now is the adverse of Nixon politics?
Not adverse, it's kind of inspired by Nixon politics, that I am someone who people do not expect to get certain things done and I can do it. He also thinks of himself as a disruptor, obviously, likes that notion of himself. He's a businessman, I get things done, I'm not beholden to traditions that other politicians may be beholden to. I would just add one more thing about this, I think it's very important that there's always been, going back to Trump 1, a contrast between the noise and the reality. He can seem quite risk-happy, trigger-happy even, but in behavior, he has tended to be risk-averse and pragmatic, and especially would not want to take things that would risk conflict, especially military conflict, or it would risk the health of the U.S. economy or the U.S. stock market.
What's next for Ukraine?
I think, first of all, Putin underestimated the Ukrainians in 2022, and I don't think the West, especially this Washington administration, should underestimate the Ukrainians today. They're not going to just stop fighting. They have the weapons. Actually, they have one of the most advanced military-industrial complexes in Europe, and certainly one of the best militaries in Europe.
And running out of people.
Yeah, but Putin's running out of tanks. And Putin's not succeeding in this war. This is where I know someone should advise Zelenskyy, maybe don't get in a fight with J.D. Vance in the Oval Office, but it's so frustrating to hear from someone who's never been to Ukraine suddenly tell you that he knows better what's going on the ground. The Russians had about 20% of the territory in 2022. They have about 20% of the territory right now. They are not winning. They are making incremental progress. The Ukrainians have done such an amazing job with innovating with drones in the sea. They've opened up the Black Sea. They've pushed the Russian Navy out of Crimea. In alternative scenario, if actually Donald Trump wanted to get a peace in Russia, he would have said, I am going to support the Ukrainians full throttle right now for the next couple of months. I am giving them all the arms they need, and then we'll negotiate when Putin's ready to actually make some concessions. Because the Ukrainians, given the support, have shown themselves. They pushed back the Russians from Kiev in a matter of weeks. We forget about this. But, Putin told his people it's over in 3 days. Now, 3 years later, the only reason why Putin could win now is because the West is divided and is weak and is going to throw a towel. But the Ukrainians will not do it willingly. They are, I've been to Ukraine, I spent a lot of time there. They so despise Russia, and they have an existential reason to keep fighting on always.
Is new Yalta possible? Well, we have a look at it. A lot of commentators, analysts, and experts say that it is one of the most, or at least likely options.
You don't have to be Polish to think that Yalta was a disaster. For Europe, we spent 40 years stuck in a great power confrontation with effectively a third world economy that controlled half the continent and blocked it off from becoming a zone of prosperity and freedom and security. I don't even know what would be on the table. I mean, if by New Yalta you mean let's figure out the Middle East, let's find a way to check China, sure, that's a decent new agreement. But you know, these great treaties, they don't really work that well in practice and don't tend to last all that long. And there already is a dam system in place with NATO, with the EU, with the alliances the U.S. has out in Asia with Korea and Japan and Australia to sort of do exactly what they're doing. So I know this is the new current. They won the elections in the U.S. They are pushing this, but it certainly does not give, at least me, any confidence that that it can work any better than what's available right now, which is much more attractive.
Donald Trump is clearly irritated by the fact that he couldn't settle the problem in the first few days of his presidency, which he promised during the campaign. But yes, this was just a political rhetoric, I understand it. But do you believe that this issue, the conflict, the war between Russia and Ukraine, can be somehow resolved until the end of this year in 2025?
I mean, what's terrifying about the Ukraine situation is actually the Afghan peace plan going back to 2019, 2020. That was actually Trump's peace plan that then Biden implemented. And what it meant was the Taliban came back within days and it blew up Biden's presidency. And I fear that Trump's instincts here are similar. He tends to put the pressure on the weaker party, which is the Ukrainians. And he has always given a free pass to Vladimir Putin, rhetorically, but also, he's not pushing him in any way. So there's a lot to be concerned about, but the game is, as we've said over and over again, is not over, and there's actually many sensible things that a lot of people thought that Trump could do better than Biden by channeling, by being much more decisive in terms of supporting the Ukrainians to gain leverage on the battlefield and then take that leverage to negotiations. For someone who says that he's about the art of the deal, he's a terrible diplomatic deal maker based on the Afghan example that we know and so far what's been going on with Ukraine and Russia.
And the last question, in that game that we're talking about, where do you see the biggest hope?
I think the best thing about Trump always is he kind of gets the blood moving and does stimulate, the autoimmune response of survival and Europe. So the best hope would be that Europe does find a way to mobilize itself and come together, does find an agreement with the U.S. And in Ukraine, I think what has to happen in Ukraine is, yes, they're not getting back all that land. You should not concede that to the Russians, but make it painful enough for Putin that it'll feel real to the Ukrainians, and it'll kind of create a South Korea on the Russian border. And I think Ukraine has now become a huge advantage to the Europeans in terms of its military industrial capacity, in terms of the strength of its military. And if you give them a good deal, then actually you can, again, ultimately, nothing will get better until you have a different regime in Moscow. But for the time being, you have to strengthen the eastern flank.
Matthew Kaminski, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.